Well, good evening, everybody. I was looking through everybody as they're coming in. I see some familiar names, so welcome. And I see you there, Diane. Hi, it's so good that you're joining us tonight. Welcome. So it's just such an honor to be with you tonight. As Barbara said, I'm the Chief Academic Officer, and I'm joined again by Barbara Patterson, Director of Marketing, and also by Leah Farrow, our Director of Product Management. And Leah will be speaking about our wonderful adolescent literacy solution with you tonight. So here's what we're going to be talking about just to kind of set the stage for our exciting evening together. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about 95% Group and our literacy ecosystem. So some of you might be new to 95% Group and want to know just a little bit about who we are and about our literacy ecosystem. Then we are really going to dig a little bit deeper into what makes adolescent and secondary word study effective. So we're going to spend some time tonight looking into the research, what makes multisyllabic decoding and morphology effective, and why it's so important to do this in that adolescent and secondary word study space. Then I'm going to turn it over to Leah, where she'll do a deep dive into our adolescent word study solution. So it's going to be a little different tonight. We're going to spend a little bit more time on that research space. So I hope some of you are really interested in digging into what we know about that special adolescent learner, that secondary and adolescent learner, and what their needs are, what makes them special in terms of their needs in literacy. Now, hold tight because everybody gets a chance at winning a free set for your classroom, but everybody's a winner because you're also going to have an opportunity to get a sample set, a sample of our adolescent word study solution at the end of the webinar. All right, so a little bit about us and who we are. 95% Group, these are our foundational principles. We believe, like all of you joining us tonight, that all children deserve a chance to learn to read. And our purpose is to unlock the power of literacy for every child. And we do that by building on the science to empower teachers and all educators, including educational leaders, by supplying knowledge, resources, and support to transform our developing readers. And by developing readers, we mean not just our beginning readers in the early grades, but also our readers in that adolescent space as well, who might be just developing. And we also have a very unique literacy ecosystem, and that is our cohesive suite of resources that is both evidence aligned, meaning aligned with that body of research known as the science of reading, as well as the science of learning and the science of teaching, and evidence-based, which means that we have evidence to support and show that our resources are proven in real classrooms with real teachers and real kids. What makes it an ecosystem is the instruction is data-driven, aligned and consistent across all tiers of instruction. So this next, kind of diagram or infographic, I guess, really kind of shows that. This shows our tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 literacy solutions, our kind of, highlight solutions. Tier 1, our phonics core program. Tier 2, our phonics lesson library. Tier 3, these are our, I guess you would call our highlight programs, 95 wrap. And you'll also see our phonics screener for intervention, which really is that data piece that connects core to intervention. So it really is an ecosystem that is aligned across tiers of instruction, underscored by professional learning that provides that support for educators using our ecosystem. We are very proud tonight to add our adolescent word study solution to that ecosystem. This is our latest addition to the 195 literacy 195 literacy ecosystem. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to spend some time really digging into what we know about adolescent reading. So one thing we know, of course, is our goal is for students to read sufficiently complex text with accuracy, fluency, and understanding. Now, some of you might be familiar with the What Works practice guides, this whole suite of practice guides that is published by the IES. And this is the one that really focuses on intervention for students in grades 4 through 9. If you're not familiar with the IES practice guides, I encourage you to look those up. These are government publications that really take the research and kind of distill them down, and really kind of show us what works in a lot of different areas. And this one is the one that really focuses on our adolescent literacy. So this is the big picture. A well-rounded instructional approach for adolescent readers includes an approach that builds and elicits background knowledge, including knowledge of of words and knowledge of the world, right? A well-rounded instructional approach includes fluency building. It also includes instruction in comprehension strategies and comprehension monitoring. Again, big picture. A well-rounded instructional approach also includes rich discussions, answering questions, helping our students make sense of challenging texts, helping our students make sense of complex ideas, building that complex thought. And a well-rounded instructional approach for our adolescent readers includes a word study component aimed at developing and securing their ability to decode and make meaning of the words they will encounter. So many people believe that by the time our students get into the intermediate and upper grades, that they no longer need a word study component, but that simply isn't true. So when we think about, here's the big picture, tonight's work is really going to focus on that word study component. Okay, so now let's pull that out and magnify that. What does that word study component look like? Well, first of all, it's really designed to provide access to that more sophisticated academic vocabulary, that cross-curricular content, and those complex ideas that our students are going to encounter as they delve into that more sophisticated text. So, an adolescent word study program needs to build on the foundations of that monosyllabic decoding from the earlier grades. It also needs to then explicitly teach repeatable, replicable routines that focuses on multisyllabic decoding. Now, multisyllabic decoding includes syllable types, division rules, and practice breaking apart words. Now, any of you that have joined us tonight who work with students from third, fourth grade on, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because many of our students who have mastered those monosyllabic words, they suddenly encounter big words and they don't know what to do. They might skip those words. They might take a running start and guess at those words. So we really need to explicitly teach routines for how to encounter and deal with multisyllabic decoding. Also, we need to help our students with morphemes. So we explicitly teach affixes and roots, identifying, defining words based on morphological units. Adolescent word study must also include lots of opportunities for practice, application, and generalization, right? Because just learning those rules, for example, for division, or learning about morphemes isn't enough. We have to be able to practice it in real reading, practice it in real writing. Okay. Now, this is really important because when we think about how do we know this? How do we know that we need this for our students? Well, this was an interesting study undertaken by RAND. Some of you might be familiar with RAND. And it was supported by the Advanced Education Research and Development Fund. And it was co-authored with the Educational Testing Service. And one thing we know is that obviously by the time our students reach upper elementary grades, that's kind of the intermediate grades, they're expected to master foundational reading skills. However, we know, and many of you probably have experienced this, that's really not true, that many of our students who reach these upper elementary grades have not really mastered basic reading skills. We also know that if they don't have basic word recognition skills, their comprehension is not going to get better, no matter how much support for comprehension they receive. Most of our schools, in our schools, we don't routinely assess word recognition skills after third grade. So we have to think about how are we making sure that our students have not only mastered basic monosyllabic decoding, but we're building on those foundational skills in multisyllabic decoding and morphology so that they can get that text off the page, right? Because they can't comprehend unless they can get that text off the page. Yeah. So sometimes when I've gone into schools and teachers say to me, Laura, our students have a problem with comprehension. Do you recommend a comprehension intervention? We have to look below the surface. Sometimes the comprehension challenge isn't really about comprehension. It's often a struggle to read the words, to read that academic vocabulary, to read that complex text, to read those multisyllabic words, to make sense of those morphological units in that complex text. So as I'm sharing this, I'm guessing that this probably rings a bell with many of you that work with our adolescent readers. So I've mentioned two things. I've mentioned multisyllabic decoding and I've mentioned morphology. So let's take both of those and let's kind of identify why both of those are important. So why is multisyllabic decoding so important to teach, right? Well, first of all, we know that students in the intermediate grades and above are faced with what David Scher calls an orthographic avalanche, 10 to 20,000 new multisyllabic words per year, right? That's a lot of words. And as I said before, many of our students don't know what to do when they encounter these words. And they may incorrectly guess. They may skip them altogether. So, if they don't have these strategies to decode these words, obviously their comprehension will be compromised. And so that's the multisyllabic decoding. What about morphology? So one thing we know is that morphology is critical because, as Castle Rassels et al. Identify, that when our students acquire knowledge of morphology, that helps them develop meaningful units of words, right? And so that helps them not only in their reading, but also with their spelling as well. Clearly, as our students grow in vocabulary, that supports their comprehension as well as writing. So when we think about both, do students need both? Yes, because English words can be polysyllabic and they can be polymorphemic. They can be both. So our students need to be flexible in using syllables as well as morphemes because we want our students to use both strategies. They kind of need them in their toolkit. I always say we want to equip our students with as many strategies as possible in their toolkit. Not all multisyllabic words can be broken down into morphemes. For example, the word elephant. They need to be able to use them both flexibly because both syllables and morphemes are two elements of multisyllabic words. So I call multisyllabic decoding and morphology heavy hitters. And for those of you who are familiar with Linnea Airy and all the phases of word reading, we want our students to get to that consolidated phase of word reading where reading across text simply makes sense. And for that to happen, as Linnea Airy says, in that consolidated phase, they have to be able to quickly apply that knowledge of both syllables and morphemes to both decode and make sense of, understand words that they encounter. So when we think also about our students who are struggling, older students who are struggling, go ahead and read this to yourself. So the research is really clear. Reading instruction for struggling older readers should focus on using syllables and morpheme analysis for promoting their multisyllabic word reading, right? So students really need both, right? Now, what about us as teachers, right? We need those supportive resources. Many of us, as we've gone through our teacher preparation, have not been prepared in understanding some of these aspects of within words understandings. We ourselves have not had the linguistic underpinnings to understand syllable patterns and syllable division rules and morphological units and affixes and roots and Latin and Greek and the etymology of our language. And as a matter of fact, that same study that I mentioned earlier also found that teachers in those intermediate and adolescent grades report that about 44% of their students frequently have difficulty reading the instructional materials in their classrooms, which are more complex texts, and that many of them, as teachers who teach ELA and other subjects, they need the evidence-based support to be able to improve their students' reading skills, given the high proportion of students who have the difficulty reading. So these teachers were basically saying they themselves did not feel prepared to help their students who were struggling with this more complex text. And as I always like to say, look, there's no shame, there's no blame. We all just have unfinished work around literacy. And it is my strong belief that using really good resources, having really good tools in our hands as educators, that really helps provide that bridge, taking this research and putting it into practice in our classrooms. And one of the hallmarks, as I mentioned earlier, about 95% group, is that we are committed to taking evidence-based and evidence-light resources and putting those resources into your hands. And our adolescent word study solution is no different. It is both evidence aligned to that evidence I've just shared with you, that research base I've just shared with you. And to help make that bridge to practice now, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Leah Farrow, who will share with you the details of this exciting new offering from 95% Group. Take it away,
Thank you
Leah.
so much. Thank you, Laura. That was great. It's so nice to really understand the research behind why all of these things happen, and I think it sets the stage really nicely for all of the great things that we're going to explore tonight. So the two pieces that you'll see on the screen here are multisyllable routine cards and morpheme magic. So again, that multisyllable and morphology. So we're going to dive into both of these in turn. We're going to just kind of start with morpheme, I'm sorry, with MSRC here. But before we get there, I want to underline the point that Laura made, which is that do you need both? Yes, that was Laura's exact words, and I think that that's as simply as it can be put. These two skill sets are what's going to help students build those academic language skills that they need for grade level success. We know that students in middle and high school have to engage with complex texts. We want them to dig into those juicy words and really engage with those materials. And in order to do that, they need these skills. So happy to help you kind of build your toolkit tonight. The goal of the Adolescent Word Study Solution is really to equip teachers with the tools and the training to help everybody decode and decipher those multisyllable words. We really do think about this as opening the door to academic language and cross-curricular learning. It's so important in those middle and high school grades. Academically and socially to be able to engage with those texts and really understand the written word that happens all around you. So we want to make sure that everybody has those skills, and obviously we share with you in that mission since you're all here tonight. So, when we talk about the adolescent word study solution, we really, really intentionally made this flexible because we know that there are so many different ways that the day can roll as we get into middle and high school. So, we're going to talk a lot about that flexibility and what it means. But first, let's just kind of take a high level look here. So, again, we're going to unlock success across subjects. We know that multisyllable decoding and morphology are going to help students to be able to pick those words up off the page and understand them, which is going to help them in math and in science and in social studies and in ELA. But it matters across the board. We know that in middle and high school and in elementary, let's be honest, nobody has a whole lot of time. We know that we had to make something that was going to be able to kind of fit in the places where you needed it to. And there's a quick turnaround here in terms of being able to deliver instruction and value to students so that you're going to see those results quickly. We want you to be able to meet every student's needs. We want you to be able to take this into different situations and be successful with it. So this is really effective for both whole group and small group. You can kind of use these pieces in different ways as it suits your needs. And lastly, as Laura mentioned, as a former teacher myself, we don't get a lot of training for these things, especially for our content area teachers. There's not always a lot of instruction on the science of reading or literacy, and so we want to make sure that you have what you need in order to be able to deliver this instruction. And so we've developed some professional learning that's going to be really helpful to you. It's going to give you those foundational pieces as well as how to use the stuff in your classroom. But we want you to have that baseline so that you can really operate with confidence as you go to implement these solutions. So first off, as I sort of previewed before, we are going to start off with decoding. We're going to help students decode and decipher. The decoding piece of this, that multisyllable decoding, is going to be through the 95 multisyllable routine cards package. I might slip, y'all, and call this MSRC. That's what we call it internally in shorthand. I apologize. That is just kind of the nickname that we use for it. So multisyllable routine cards, again, can be delivered in whole or small group. They're 10-minute, quick little fun lessons. There is an explicit focus on the six syllable types and how to work with them. So there's a 3-week cycle that we work through. First, we're going to learn to recognize the syllable pattern. Then we're going to read pseudo words that follow the pattern. And lastly, we're going to take that and build it into reading multisyllable words that follow the pattern. So students really do learn this as a systematic word attack strategy, and it covers about 85% of English words. So you'll be able to decode about 85% of English words, understanding the six syllable types and the patterns with the strategies in the multisyllable routine cards. That's a huge percentage. It's very effective for 10 minutes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's a strong dose in a little bit of time. So let's look at a lesson so you can kind of see what these pieces are. I do want to reiterate that there is an opportunity at the end here to access a sample, so don't feel like you have to squint at the screen and try to read these pieces. It will all be available to you. Pseudo words really level the playing field, right? You have to be able to decode in order to pick up those pseudo words. You can't just sort of have that automatic, good guess. There does need to be some decoding that happens there. Also, MSRC really well incorporates physical movements to connect the sounds and the structure with gestures. So there's kind of that little bit of kinesthetic piece in there. Instructional routines take the guesswork out of implementation. This is really important. We want you to be able to deliver the most effective instruction possible. And in order to do that, we want to make sure that you have the right words, the right language yourself to be able to speak to these things. And so there really is very explicit dialogue in the curriculum, and it allows you to deliver a really effective lesson. Also, if you're familiar with 95% group solutions, you are familiar with our radical dedication to explicit modeling and gradual release. There is an I do, a we do, and a you do phase of all of our materials, and you will see that represented here as well. This is in an effort to make sure that we're giving students an opportunity to watch an expert, to practice in a safe space as a group, and then to kind of test out their sea legs and do it themselves. So you'll see that represented here as well. Here we'll see the we do section. There are really flexible visuals to meet student needs. We do have different ways that you can implement these lessons. We'll get into that in just a moment. We focus on both accuracy and fluency. You heard Laura talk a little bit about that earlier. That's really important based on the research. Students need the opportunity to work on their accuracy, to get those words right, and then to practice reading fluently. And again, the more practice, the better, right? We have lots of opportunities here to extend and to deliver a lot of that practice so that if students aren't getting it, if they need more help, you've got an opportunity here to continue to practice and make sure that folks have what they need to be successful. Lastly, here is the you do. That's that independent practice. And we use it in MSRC, multisyllable routine cards, for formative assessment. So this is an opportunity for you as an educator to understand your students' needs and where they might be. And again, those pseudo words provide us with an opportunity to apply the strategy. So you'll notice I just told you didn't have to squint, but if you squint at the screen, you'll notice that those are pseudo words on that student handout. Again, giving you an opportunity to really assess whether or not students are understanding the concept that you're working on in that syllable type. This is what is called a presentation file, digital presentation file. We have these for a number of our products. They are well loved and for good reason. This is something that I would project on my interactive whiteboard or put up on a TV or a projector or whatever you got. This is an opportunity for us to make your lives a little bit easier as an educator. You'll notice that there are some animations in here as I click through. And what I'm doing is basically automating your practice, right? So here we are, we're working on vowel R syllable. You can see what, sort of what the pattern looks like. We're looking at examples and we're going to start sorting them, right? So here we have one, we're seeing there's a vowel letter followed by a consonant R. Does that meet the pattern? Yes, it does. So we're kind of automating that practice for you, making that gradual release really straightforward, and taking that off of your plate. You don't need to pick up a whiteboard marker, which is very handy. Lastly, here, I just want to show you these daily pacing guides. These are really, really useful. We basically break down exactly what to do on which day. So there really is no guesswork here for you. You're able to just pick this up and, take a quick peek at what you're teaching today and work through it. So it really is all mapped out, hopefully making this really, really easy for you to pick up and run with. These are all the components of the multisyllable routine cards solution. So you'll notice there is a teacher's guide, there are some sorting cards, those presentation files that I just showed you, some printable student pages, some printable aligned text, so that you're able to kind of get that practice in that Laura mentioned. We know that practice is really important. And then there are some posters of the syllable types and the rules that you can use as anchor charts to point kids to as they work through these concepts, even outside of your lesson. So those are kind of the components of the multisyllable routine cards. Again, this is where we're working on that decoding piece, picking up those words off the page. And then we move into deciphering. So we want to make sure that not only can students pick those words up, but in the situations where there are morphological elements, they can understand what they're reading. So this is Morpheme Magic. Hopefully you have met her. She is delightful. This is the third edition of Morpheme Magic. So this is actually yet to be released. This is going to come out here in June. We're very excited. Again, Morpheme Magic is great. You can use it in whole group or small group. They're 20-minute daily lessons, quick and easy. What this allows you to do is to build that morphological knowledge that forms academic vocabulary. What it allows you to do is to really focus on specific word parts so that students are able to pick those pieces apart when they see them in the wild and understand what they're reading. The cool thing about this is that one morpheme really does unlock so many things. As we have worked on Morpheme Magic, I have, you know how when something happens in your life, all you notice is that thing? Like you get a dog and all you see are dog food commercials. When you focus on Morpheme Magic for a while, all you see are morphemes. And I have had so much fun just thinking about this as I move my way through the world. But here's an example of tract and where that shows up in different words and how often you might see these pieces and where they might show up in your school day, in your work day, in your life. So there is a ton of relevance to all of these elements. Let's again look at a lesson here. I'll show you just kind of a quick peek. Again, Morpheme Magic is going to focus on meaningful word parts instead of whole words. So we're going to focus on one little chunk of a word and what that means and how it affects the other pieces of the word and what impact it has. We want to make sure that there are a lot of exposures to a given word part to morpheme so that students are able to see it in a variety of contexts and get a good practice with it. This program also includes some systematic explicit instruction, right? We want to make sure that, again, you have the words to be able to pull these in and work through the lesson without having to do any guesswork. We also include ready-to-use differentiation opportunities. We want to make sure that there is a chance for you to spiral this up or down based on what you need, based on what you're seeing from your students, and really give them the opportunity to dig into these pieces. We know how important that practice is, and so we want them to get access to it, right? Even if it requires some adjustment. Lots of built-in discussion opportunities in Morpheme Magic. When you think about it, all of these elements of this instruction are based in real life, right? These are words students might see in textbooks or in in a trade book, whatever. There's a lot of opportunity to talk about where you might see these words, where you might see word parts like this. And we do help you to kind of demystify some of where you might see a word part, things like that. Lots of embedded teacher supports. We want this to be really easy for you all to teach from. And so worked really hard to make sure that those teacher supports are in there and you've got what you need to be successful. I am seeing some questions in the chat, and I think this is a good opportunity for me to just take a second and answer this.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Leah. I was just gonna say, is this a good time to answer this question? 'Cause we've got several people that have kind of said they have the
Mhm,
same question. I don't know if you saw it or not, but basically it's really about the placement of the adolescent solution, tier one, tier two, aligned with science and social studies. Like, where would you suggest we place this?
I have such a nice slide with a beautiful graphic that was designed exactly for this purpose.
Perfect.
So to answer the question at a high level,
Yes.
these elements can be utilized in a variety of different ways. They are appropriate for whole group. They are appropriate for small group. Different situations might require different things, and the flexibility is intentional so that you can move pieces around and find a solution that works for your school. So I promise I will come back to that in just a moment.
Great. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so before we get there, I just wanted to recap the components of Morpheme Magic. So you'll see, of course, the teacher's guide, the lessons, teacher presentation files are new in this edition of Morpheme Magic. I'll show you them in just a second. Wall cards you might be familiar with if you are used to Morpheme Magic. The Connect passages are printable now. In previous editions of Morpheme Magic, if you have had the privilege of using that program, they were sort of like just built into the lesson. So we pulled those out and made them really easy for you. Assessments are also going to be printable. The third edition of the book has been updated in partnership with Dr. Deb Glazer, who we're actually going to do another webinar about Morpheme Magic third edition here coming up. So come join that one if you want to learn a bunch more about Morpheme Magic. But we've done a lot of work to make this more explicit and to improve the teacher supports in there. So a lot of great work went into the third edition. These are the presentation files. So again, same goal, right? We want to make sure that that gradual release is there for you as an educator and trying to make this super easy for you to implement. So I'm here looking at the morphemes, we're scooping the morphemes, we're defining the morphemes, and then we're going to talk about what they mean. And then we'll do examples. So the guest teacher taught us a lot about how words form. There's a teacher, an ancestor, a survivor. And then here's a sample of that connect passage, right? So this is sort of a little bit of a fancy fill in the blank where you are able to plug those words in based on your new knowledge about their meaning. So again, I think the moral of the story here is that we know based on all that beautiful research that Laura shared that multisyllable decoding and morphology are really important to help these students build that knowledge that they need to be able to pick up those juicy words across subject areas to engage with that academic language. And so really excited to get to kind of share these pieces with you tonight. Again, I wanted to just take a quick second and talk about professional learning. We want to make sure that you as educators have what you need to be successful. So we will take that 6-hour session and we'll go through foundational concepts. We'll talk a little bit about the syllable types and multisyllable decoding. If that's not something you're familiar with or comfortable with, we'll help you with that, right? We gotcha. We will talk about the delivery of components with differentiation and recommendations for scheduling. So again, of course, those questions reflect that curiosity, right? Of like, where does this fit in the day? How do we use it? We'll help you with some recommendations there. This is that big, beautiful graphic I was talking about a moment ago. And this is a reflection of our understanding that everybody is going to do this differently. There are, different students with different needs and different scheduling structures. So we wanted to make sure that there was a defined path, sort of no matter how you wanted to do this. I think pathway one is sort of the the ideal situation, right? Where you have the opportunity within an ELA period to work on both of these things. Maybe we do multisyllable routine cards first and then morpheme magic after. Maybe we do one of them in small groups, right? There's different opportunities to do that, but there are also other paths. So maybe you do multisyllable routine cards within an ELA period and morpheme magic in social studies or science. You use the morphemes to sort of reflect what's happening in your curriculum and pull in those fancy vocabulary words as they come up and work through it that way. Maybe you do multisyllable routine cards in tier two and morpheme magic in tier one. Maybe you do multisyllable routine cards the first half of the year and morpheme magic the second half of the year. These are all ways we've seen people do this. So these are not just random. This is not just us dreaming up all the ways you could sort of use these materials. I think it does depend on your situation. And I think your 95% group partner can absolutely help you to kind of map out the best way to implement these pieces. Laura, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, but I think what the last thing you said is really important because I think as people there were questions about this, like how does
Hmm.
an ELA teacher use this, or
Yep.
what are the options for each grade level? We had several
Hmm.
people say,
Yes.
what
Yep.
if I use MS if I use multi-syllabic
Yep.
routine cards in fourth and fifth grade, what would I use in sixth grade? So I
Yes.
think this is a really it's really important to partner with your 95% group account executive to really help make the decision as to how you're going to use this. So I think
Hmm.
what Lee is really showing us here is there's different pathways depending on how you want to use this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we did have a question here about just maybe to reiterate, one-time purchase or subscription purchase.
Yep. I'll get to that in just a moment too, but
Okay,
just to highlight, it is by and large, it's a one-time curriculum purchase. There are the presentation files are renewable, so you're able to
thank you.
subscribe to those year over year, but they're included in your first year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So again, we know that the flexibility is important here. And to Laura's point, we're happy to help you to find the best fit. But generally speaking, if you wanted to implement this in a whole or small group in tier one, we would expect 25 to 30 minutes a day. We assume that this is going to be the best for students who need support based on test scores. And that is the 20% or more of your students. And that's a low estimate. So, there's a great opportunity to implement in tier one here. Also, some information about progress checks and sort of how to check for understanding. There are formative lesson level assessments included, and those will guide your pacing in tier one. If you are to implement this in tier two in some capacity, we're going to extend that time a little bit, right? You want to spend a little more of your day with this to make sure that students are getting what they need. It's great if you need to work on some targeted intervention pieces, and the progress check there would be the phonics screener for intervention, which is included, and you would implement that about every 3 weeks. Um, this also ties in really beautifully with our phonics lesson library. So if you find that you have students who need more explicit support, who are really need work on those discrete phonics skills, the phonics lesson library is a great fit to sort of add an additional layer of support. Another thing that we know is really important here is all of these questions that are coming in are fantastic, and we knew you were going to have them. We knew you were going to have these questions, and so we wanted to provide an implementation guide. We want to make sure that you feel supported and that you have options for how to do this. So the implementation guide is included with the adolescent word study solution, and it tells you how to break up materials for use across grades, how you might want to schedule your day, how to differentiate, how to run those progress monitoring pieces. So there is a lot of information in the implementation guide. And again, your 95% group partner can kind of help you to walk through those things to answer the question of sort of how would you do this? How, if you taught all of this in sixth grade, what do you do in seventh and eighth grade, for example? As at a high level, we want to make sure that everybody gets this instruction at least once, right? So if you were to implement the adolescent word study solution in grade 6, for example, in your ELA in Tier 1, then everybody gets that multisyllable decoding, everybody gets that morphology. And again, we provide you with opportunities to break up, especially morpheme magic across grades. So there will be a set of morphemes for grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, so that you're not reteaching the same thing over and over. We would then find in following years that multisyllable routine cards might be the kind of thing that you would teach in small group for students who maybe need a little extra help in seventh and eighth grade, or it might move into a tier 2 solution. So there's different ways to do this, and any definition that I give you in the moment is not going to be sufficient. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of understanding about how those programs might move throughout the year and throughout the as students progress throughout middle school and high school. So back to your pricing question and how you purchase this. So for a limited time, you are able to acquire all these goodies for $522, and that includes all of the materials and the professional learning. We really, really want to make sure that you have a great foundation and are set up for success with using these materials. So that price includes that 6-hour session of professional learning. So all the pieces that we talked about are included. You get those teacher's guides, the posters, the cards, the wall cards, the implementation guide, and those presentation files. So the presentation files are the only thing that is a renewable purchase. Everything else is a one-time purchase. One last thing I wanted to talk about here. I did just mention one of these things, but there are some great ways to extend your instruction. So if you are in those middle and high school grades and you are finding yourself in need of some help with literacy, we have some other great pieces that are going to be really useful to you. And if you purchase the Adolescent Word Study Solution, we can also offer you a discount on some of these pieces. So first off, we have our 95 readables. These are great decodable chapter books that are written to entertain middle school students. They're written at the interest level of middle school students, but with those basic phonics skills are being practiced. So great opportunity there. Those align really well with our phonics lesson library as well, which is on the far right there, as a part of our adolescent intervention system. So that adolescent intervention system includes both the digital assessment of our phonics screener for intervention, and then the instruction to help you to intervene based on what that assessment finds. And then lastly, here in the middle, but certainly not least, is Spellography by Dr. Louisa Moats and Bruce Russo. Amazing program that it's called Spellography, but it really is a word study program.
Mhm.
It's about breaking the code and understanding the language and really gives you great context. So this is it's a great program that does a little bit of everything, I think. So another great program for your tier 2 in middle school, especially. That's a great solution. And with that, Laura, anything you wanted to add to
Um,
what I
yeah,
said?
just to clarify, Leah, we had a question about 522 per teacher per
Yes.
grade. Yes, it's per teacher.
522 gets you it depends on how you implement it. So let me correct myself there. If you are doing this in a way where you're going to do it in your ELA block and, one teacher is going to use both programs, then yes, it's 522 per teacher. If you're in a situation where maybe you're going to teach one program in social studies and another in ELA, there are different ways to break it up, but the 522 gets you that whole kit. So hopefully that helps.
All right. You can get yourself a sample lesson, scan the code to receive abbreviated version of the implementation guide, sample lesson for multisyllabic routine cards, sample lesson for Morpheme Magic 3rd edition, including presentation file, printable student page. So, hey, this is a great one. This is a great little giveaway right here for everybody. Everybody's a winner. Go ahead and
Yeah.
scan that. So we've got some really exciting upcoming webinars. So we have a new book. It's called Science of Reading 3.0, Widening the Lens on Literacy. And this is our newest book. And this is really about, kind of all kind of broad topics around science of reading. And it's just such a great privilege of mine to be able to welcome some of our contributing authors to this book. On April 7th, I'll be in conversation with Terry Noland and Danielle Thompson, and we'll be talking about leadership in literacy. We'll also delve a little bit into language as the foundation of all literacy, so you don't want to miss that on April 7th. On May 12th, we're going to be talking with the wonderful Julie Van Dyke. Some of you might know her. Her area of expertise is syntax, and syntax is one of the areas of literacy that I think we need to really widen our lens on and focus on syntax. It really is kind of one of those areas we haven't paid a lot of attention to, and I think we need to, especially as we think about writing and also comprehension. So, Julie Van Dyke is going to really enlighten us on developing sentence sense and syntax with our students on May 12th. On June 4th, you do not want to miss this. Amir Baraka will have an inspiring and uplifting message for all of us, and I'll be in conversation with him. He'll be talking about his life story and about the importance of early identification in dyslexia and his story as a young man and what he faced as a young man as a student who didn't learn to read and his kind of story of redemption as an adult who finally did learn to read and go on to be a successful actor, a successful writer and author, and advocate for all of our students. You do not want to miss Amir. So go ahead and register to attend those. Also, we have an introduction to Morpheme Magic 3rd edition. I know we had a question earlier about Morpheme Magic 3rd edition. And so Deb Glazer, the author of Morpheme Magic, will be in a webinar with us on Wednesday, April 22nd at 6:30. And please feel free to join us for that. Registration will open on April 6th. So mark your calendars. There'll be more on that. And she'll be talking more about Morpheme Magic, so you don't want to miss that, 6:30 p.m. Also, some of you were asking about your who to contact, and we have these are wonderful account executives, 95% group. Also, Leah and I have put our contact information here. If you'd like to reach out to either one of us, please feel free. Account executives find your state, and these are the wonderful people, experts in their own right in literacy that you can reach out to learn more about all of our products and all of our services here at 95% Group. Again, thank you all so much for joining us tonight and spending your valuable time with us. It's our privilege and honor to support you in the important work that you do. So thanks again, and thank you, Barb and Leah, and have a wonderful night.